Buckle up for AEC Trailblazers, the Founders Files, where we crack open the stories of the brightest minds in the AEC startup scene. Forget institutional pitches. We're diving deep into the real personal journeys of these industry disruptors. Get ready for some casual chats firsthand.
Hello, and welcome everybody to the AC Trailblazers podcast, where we interview the most amazing founders on the AC. Today with us we have Eshan. He is the founder and CEO of Krane, an AI native platform built to make construction procurement and material management more predictable from spec to install. Based in San Francisco, Crane works with general contractors, owners, and subcontractors to identify procurement risk before it turns into a scheduled impact. A licensed professional engineer from a third generation construction family, Eshan came to this problem from the field, not from the theory. Before founding Crane, he coordinated materials procurement on Chevron's Tengine's expansion, one of the world's largest industrial construction projects, where 46 billion in materials were under coordination. He has also overseen more than 5 billion in active data center construction materials. With more than a decade in the built environment, Eshan brings a rare combination of construction experience, engineering discipline, and AI-driven product vision. He works is focused on solving one of the industry's more persistent challenges, making construction supply chain more reliable, more visible, and far less reactive. Eshan, welcome to the show.
Valentin, thanks for having me. I feel like you've given all everything away in the first minute, but happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Um, I mean, you have done so much. That's on you because you have done so much that it's your problem, not my bio, I guess.
Yeah.
But before we get into the weeds, before we get into what you're doing with Crane, the data center world, the supply chain, how did all started? Like, why on earth did you decide to get into the construction industry first?
Um, I think it's something that I inherited from my family more than sort of getting into it. Like I saw my grandfather and my father involved in trades. I saw them building some really cool projects. They used to take me to sites. I think early on, what I remember is a bunch of like concrete pours and hundreds of people around, commotion, and just sort of seeing things get built just got fascinated. I just got fascinated by it. So went into construction, but I thought I wanted to take an engineering design sort of perspective first before I jumped into construction. So I spent I did civil engineering for my undergrad, and then right after that, I spent time with Stantec, digging into like the engineering side of like the equation, right? I remember doing a little bit of land development. I did like structural engineering afterwards. Like you said, becoming a licensed professional engineer. The whole thing there was like I wanted to be responsible and stamp the drawings that like my team creates. So sort of went through that journey. I did that in Austin, and it was such an eye-opening experience for me because I've seen a lot of construction growing up, but I didn't see what happens upstream of that on the engineering side, right? So uh, right then and there, I saw disconnect between like people who are building things and people who are designing and engineering things. So that's where like early thoughts around like how like information flows to the field like sort of started coming into my mind. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of like some of the early work that I did. um, and then like eventually I went into I mean got into construction through self-perform. One of the things my dad said was make sure you go work for a self-perform team first before you go into general contracting, because you will learn how to build. So my time at Webco Concrete, they made me a builder, right? They made me understand like what it takes to sort of you know coordinate the field and like really drive production. Think about every prerequisite and information piece that like our labor teams need to build, right? And if there's any deviation from that, how that impacts the team. How do you hire great like tradesmen, right? Like what they need, right? Like so I was exposed to that, and that was brilliant. And then went on to the general contracting side, just to sort of then take that same perspective but across multiple different trades. Right now you're sort of organizing and coordinating, the flow of work across like different types of projects. So that was fascinating, right? Because knowing what you know, what I knew then about the fundamentals of how our tradespeople work, what they need. My goal was to sort of get them what they need and get out of the way, right? So, um, and like just to get to your question, I like across all of my experiences, one thing that sort of kept on and on and on and kept on bothering me was sort of this like lack of awareness or lack of like focus on materials, right? And I always kept wondering if half the cost on a job is materials, right? And if we're not sort of really looking into that, whether you're a trades, whether you're a whether you're a trade partner or a GC, you're sort of like there's a huge gap there. There's a huge visibility issue, and then sort of went deeper and deeper and deeper into sort of solving the problem, and that's how we started.
I mean, it's a great story because like we went from, and I do agree. I'm an architect. Don't judge me. But but I mean, it's truth. It's like when you are on design, everything it's perfect. You're in this environment where you can just draw lines. Nothing bad is going to happen. But then, as soon as that goes to the field, that's complete madness, chaos, or complexity. Right? The complexity increases so much, and it's way harder. And I love how you went from like not only being a GC, which is typical. Like a lot of GCs have been GCs their whole life, and they have never been part of a team that does self perform. And even materials, it's true. Like I used to work with a general contractor as well, and the reality is exactly like you said. Typically, the focus is on the subcontractors or the people, but not so much on the materials. And materials might be, like you said, even more than half of the cost of the construction. But it's always like, well, it's like a given, right? It's gonna come somehow. We're gonna get the concrete. Somehow we're gonna get the floors. Somehow we're gonna get everything. But it turns out it's not as simple as that, right?
No, absolutely not. I think the complexity is you're dealing with different types of supply chains, right? Like, you have long lead items, you have stuff that go through some level of prefab, you have off the shelf items, right? Like so, we look at it like, okay, there's low volume, high complex material that go through multiple different stages on a supply chain. How do you deal with that? What sort of visibility and awareness do you need for things like that? But then there's also high volume, low complex, off the shelf items, right? Like that you pick up at, I don't know, like Granger, Home Depot, White Cap, and or like your drywall items. And how do you want to deal with that, right? Is that like different? Do you consider more about volume there and less about doing, checking like for the handoffs in the supply chain? So that like you have to have a really good game plan on how you're managing this material flow onto the job site. And I think that's a big indicator for me. I've seen across my jobs, teams that manage the supply chain well or the material flow, I think they perform absolutely way better in terms of executing on the projects. So for
Interesting.
us at Crane, like we want every project to sort of have that level of visibility so that at least from a supply chain standpoint, there's no gaps or bottlenecks.
That makes sense. And something like just gonna ask a question, like me being naive
No,
on
no, please.
supply chain, right? And I bet a lot of people in the industry are the same. Like when when you think on supply chain, right? you could say it's something that happens on every industry, but I bet that our industry is way more complex than other industries because each project materials are different, and it might be custom materials. It's not like doing supply chain for a supermarket or doing supply chain for even for an industry, right? I
Yep.
bet complexities are way harder. So I would love to understand how you deal with that, how you deal with those complexities compared to other industries where you always know the flow of materials that typically an industry needs, but on each project being different, how you deal with that? You try to use the same materials every time, or how you try to mitigate that?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons why you can't. I mean, these like procurement software and ERP systems, the standard ones existed, right? Like there's stuff out there like that's off the shelf. The reason why you can't use those is because of exactly the complexity that you're talking about, right? So I think from a supply chain standpoint, there's like two sort of there's like approval and documentation related to supply chain, but then there's also like sort of the movement of like actual material as well. So like when you're looking at the complexity of the system, you want to sort of look at like what I said before, right? Like you want to almost like categorize these two different types of like supply chains, right? One, supply chains that are low volume but high complex, like switchgear, generators, chillers, air handling units, where it's a lot spec driven, right? Like you have like an engineer or an architect like specifying certain types of equipment, and sort of you have to go through that due diligence of like, okay, is this available? What are the lead times associated with it, right? Does like do the bids that are supplied by the vendor match the performance, the compliance, the warranty, the lead time requirements from like this particular project, right? Assessing that very upstream in the supply chain is one component of it. And then as you move through the bottom half of it, which is like now submittals, right? Like, can we get the submittals approved on time? Can we get the product data? And then like you go into sort of then this mode of let's check, like is what number are we on the OEM side in terms of like getting this fabricated? Are we going to get it on time, right? So what's like what are the handoffs that we need to track there, all the way to delivery, and then installation, commissioning, handoff to the owner, maintaining data, warranty, operation. So like the complexity is in like sort of the nuance of the supply, different types of supply chains, right? So I just walked you through some of the handoffs in this process, everything from when it's put on a spec to when it's sort of like installed and commissioned and like given to like the owner. And today, like this is all over the place in spreadsheets, and like it's not tracked as well as we want to. And then in there, in the handoffs is when like the risks occur, right? And that's sort of what we're trying to sort of change. Not Valentine, like I said, like not every type of material need to sort of go through this process of evaluation or tracking, right? Drywall or like something consumable that's off the shelf. There, you probably want to worry about how much you're bringing, right? How do you control the volume that comes into the job site so you're efficient? Because you like if you have pallets and pallets of drywall or like plumbing items all over your level one, all of a sudden that impacts the productivity of your labor team, right? So it's just a balance of like how you want to sort of look at these different types of supply chain and control that well on your job site.
That makes sense. And do you think that the biggest, not say a problem, but do you think that typically on the design phase that this gets overlooked? Like not because people do it on purpose, but most likely if you pick materials not only because of pricing or quality, but also considering supply chain, because if I'm gonna have to build, like, I don't know, purchase something that is gonna take I don't know, 6 months to get to the job site and it gets late. Do you think it's important, it's a problem that that it's happening nowadays, or you don't think it's that important to consider the supply chain from the initial design phase?
I mean, I think like this whole process is a little backwards, isn't it? Right? Like you specify, you then check whether it's available, then you sort of deal with like delayed fabrication and you try to install it, right? Like it should be reverse, right? Like whoever's specifying equipment on a job should have an active live library of what's available, what lead times are, what the prices are, so that they can then choose by choose by what's available, right? And move that project, in the right way, in the right direction, right? But unfortunately, rather than overseeing that process, Valentine, I think they just don't have that data, right? That data set has not been created, right? So because they don't have that data, they're just sort of going through that same process of, okay, I guess like we'll do the same spec, or like this spec had worked for us during the last 10 years, let's do the same thing, right? And we'll give the same 5 vendors as examples of like, systems that they should purchase, and like get in, like, so you just sort of go through this same thing over and over again. And I think with what happened with in 2022, 2023, and 2024 5, with the like, what I mean by that is like what happened with COVID and the supply chain chaos that happened, with what happened with tariffs, and with what's going on with like the data center boom. This is completely changing, right? Now owners and engineers and architects are working together with systems like us to sort of say, hey, like what's available, what can we get faster, so that we can design around what's available rather than like the other way around. So which is like quite amazing to see, because they're making decisions based on data, right? Which is what we want to do.
That makes sense. And something that for me it's really interesting about what you guys are doing is like I used to work for Meta on the design side for data centers, and the amount of parts and the cost of parts and time is just insane. And how you deal with that, how you keep up with knowing and getting all this data that it's gold for developers. It's kind of gold, right? For big owners out there, the GCs who are doing data centers, is like how with Krane you keep up, being able to help and provide the data that is necessary to help this kind of companies on data centers.
I mean, look, man, like to be honest, like we first, like for the first 2 to 3 years, we did the hard work, right? Which is we deployed with the GC at the project level and try to understand like this complexity that we're talking about across multiple different supply chains: mechanical, electrical, plumbing, steel, consumable items, right? Like, and where what we did there was to help the GC put a good system in place, so that you clearly understand what needs to come on site through the schedule, and you sort of work backwards to understand what are the handoffs and the dates that we need to track, whether it's delivery dates, whether it's when the PO needs to be released, whether when the submittal needs to be released, or whether when the buyout needs to happen, right? So we said, okay, let's position our, like, we're a procurement company, we're a supply chain company, right? Like we said, okay, you know what? Let's forget about trade partners for a second. Let's go to the GC and sort of see how they do this work today. And it was chaos, right? It was like through a spreadsheet and a procurement log, and we just saw how difficult it was to sort of, number one, like get any type of oversight, and then also to keep like that data set live and active through like discussions from subs and suppliers, right? So we said, okay, great, like AI can do this better, so let's go position ourselves there. Let's help the GC put a really good supply chain monitoring system in place, understand how each of these trade partners work, the complexity in their supply chain. Let's really learn, right? So we learned a ton. We learned about lead times. We learned about like product data. We learned about how like even trade partners get visibility from vendors and OEMs, right? We learned so much. And like in hindsight, when all my investors were asking questions like, hey, like, isn't like trade partners are the ones who are like buying materials? Like, why are you like targeting GCs? And I said, like, look, we have a bigger picture here, right? Like, yes, I get that. But I think for us to sort of solve this problem, which is what I care about, right? At that point, it wasn't like we also like aligned with investors that, hey, listen, like our goal is not to go and make a ton of money on year one, right? We want to solve this supply chain problem, and it has to start at the project level so that we can identify and understand where are the supply chain issues, why are we running into these problems, and how can we then go deep. And that's what we did. And through that process, I could say we were lucky, or you could say that I thought, well, we got like these data points that were brilliant, right? Now with this data set, empowered by this, we now went more upstream into procurement. We know like who's challenged by that, right? We know what the complicated like packages are. Then we went upstream and said, hey, like let's go build real procurement to help the buyers buy this material and equipment better and streamline that process all the way to delivery. That's sort of like the approach that we took, and that's why we have like these data points that we do.
I love it. Do you have any stories, or like typically, you're a tech founder and you get to a point that you build your product and suddenly, I don't know, you solve such a big problem to a specific client that he's so happy on this. Like, do you have any stories where you have that aha moment where, or a story you can share? No need to share names, absolutely not. But a story you can share about when a client has actually came to you and said, you know what, this is just changing the way we work completely.
Yeah, I mean, like many, right? Like I can think of examples of like where um, it's sort of the simplest ask from like an engineering and product standpoint, but the impact to the customers were huge, right? Just sort of doing, I remember, right? Like just because of like the data that we have, like one of our customers that are on like I think they had like 4 data center buildings in their project. It's a massive project. So they wanted to understand, hey, like what are my buyout dates? When give me some sort of notification 7 days out from when that submittal needs to be approved. 7 days out from that when that PO was like released, and then whether there's any delivery risk. So we created sort of a very simple email notification system for all the different trades and for the GC, so that everyone's aware of like all these critical handoff milestones. It just sort of like it just created this moment of excitement and happiness because everybody was on the same page, right? Like so like like for us on the engineering and the product side, it wasn't a massive thing. Like we already have the data. It was just sort of presenting the data in a way that it's extremely clear to the GC and to the trades was sort of out of the. It just made them like so much happy. So what I'm trying to say is like sometimes it's just sort of listening to them and sort of giving them an experience that is very simple because they're already like so busy with like firefighting and like dealing with a lot of things, right? And we can make it extremely complicated, or we can make it extremely simple for them to sort of digest the information. So that's an example of like where like immediate satisfaction, right, for that customer. Another thing that where like I mean like I remember getting visibility into point of origin of deliveries, and having to sort of look at like carbon emissions, right? Because now that's sort of like coming to the forefront with like some of the deliveries. Just sort of having that data point and being able to sort of track that again, right? Simply without too much of like chaos or emails, like just sort of excited the customer, right? Like, but and these days we're working on a lot of like design partnerships on the procurement side to understand, you know, how do you sort of, you know, vet these bids, do bid leveling, you know, and sort of working together with like these customers who are also design partners have been brilliant. Just to sort of like go week to week and show them, hey, like here's what we've done now last week. What's your feedback? Just to sort of see the tweaks happen and like move. And we're also in a world where like things can move like really fast now, Valentine, if we have the right feedback, right? So just having that like loop where like you're building, you're getting good feedback, you're sort of pushing that out to the world and like getting feedback has been tremendous. And I think it's and I think the biggest thing is like we've like we've earned that trust from the customer to say, okay, good, I think I can work with them because I think they listen, and then they can sort of help us, you know, solve that problem.
Ah, I love it. I love it. I'm just curious, like just changing gears a little bit here, given the fact that I bet a lot of your clients are doing data centers, right? Like everybody's doing data centers nowadays. So,
Right.
and the reality is like it's such a specific building, and you need always the same, typically, right? The same parts, like a generator, for example. Like every data center needs a generators or gas turbines now that everybody wants to generate their own energy, and it's getting harder and harder and slower to get those specific equipments. Do you think is getting disrupted? The supply chain is getting disrupted for data centers, and do you think this is going to improve over time, or what do you think about that? You are working so closely with them.
I mean, Valentine, to be honest, the hyperscaler growth is impacting every other sector outside of data centers, right? Like, I mean, like I wrote an article on my blog called, Two Booms, about the same problem. Like, for an example, we're on a lot of like new hospital projects, right? They're getting impacted because they're using the same equipment. They're using the same generators, like the air handling units. It's the same thing, right? Like, so the hyperscaler demand and like the pace at which they're spending money on buying this equipment is putting a ton of bottleneck in like all of these other projects, and we're seeing that, right? So and sometimes some of these other sectors can't, I mean, they can't outspend like the hyperscalers, right? So all of a sudden, we've seen like this huge imbalance of like supply and demand. But the good thing is now we're able to sort of give that data point and show that, so that like you as an owner can sort of take some decisions on, okay, is this the right time to like deploy this project? Do we have the supply chain ready, right? If not, what can we do? So like these are things that are like now coming to the forefront. Like, I mean, but even within data centers, right, there's like the hyperscaler growth, and then there's the neo clouds. There's a lot of data center projects that are coming live, right? So even there, the number one ask, are there alternative vendors, right? Or like what number am I on this line for this OEM? Can we get any visibility so that we know that there's no risk in terms of like the money that I'm spending? Because I mean, I'm talking to a sort of a neo cloud data center company that's deploying us, and the first thing is like, okay, when should I actually cut my check so that I can increase my ROI, right? Because they don't want to sort of cut the check at any time before sort of like getting access to that line data. So that's sort of like interesting to kind of see.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
and about Crane,
Yeah.
what do you think is next for you guys? Like, I mean, it's great that you have spoken to, or you're speaking with and working with design, the owner, GCs. What's coming for you guys? And I know everything is changing so much and everything in the pace so fast, but what's changing for you in the short and midterm?
I mean, I wouldn't say like we have a very clear vision and mission of, you know, being the system across these different handoffs that I talked to you about. Everything from the spec to like delivery, commissioning. So for us, it's about, okay, executing like that vision that we have. But I think in the short term, it's just sort of it's working with like really good visionaries on the customer side to help us sort of navigate the nuances in like the work that we do. If it's easy, everybody would have done it, Valentine, right? Like there's so much complexity
Sure.
in this process that you talk. Like we're working with EPC contractors right now to sort of understand how do we assess some of these vendors better, assess like these bids better, which is amazing, right? We're gonna now go downstream and do the same thing on the commissioning side, on the handoff of like all this data to like the owners, right? So like it's just like you know staying true to like what we believe, which is you know today we have to get out of all these spreadsheets across all these different folks. We need to get on one system so that everybody plays a role in this supply chain. That's the other thing. That's why this is also a very complicated sort of problem to solve, right? I'm not building just a product for a GC or just something for a supplier. Everybody takes some role in this process. So how do you build something that is valuable for everyone? Because you have to. Because if I were to solve the supply chain problem, everybody needs to sort of do their part, right? So that's sort of like where we need a lot of help. Getting good people together to solve this problem has been like what I'm focusing on, bringing on good partners to sort of solve this problem for our industry. So and in the short term, I keep thinking about this, Valentine, right? Like I think you probably see you build products as well, so you kind of see this. You know, just like I keep thinking about this, like to solve like constructability issues, we try to involve our trade partners and our construction experts early in design, right? Like when you're designing something or when you're like doing like reviews, you try to bring them in early in this process. Just like that, we've seen on the engineering side, we've gotten to a place where like product engineering, UI UX, all like sort of are moving into this one area where like because we can ship very quickly, it's just sort of getting the entire team very very clear on the problem statement and like the solution and talking to the customers more and more. So it's almost as if like we're involving the engineering team early in like these designs in this sort of solution approach that's sort of helping us as well. So that's something in from a technology standpoint that we're thinking through, that's sort of shifting how we build now.
That's so great. Yeah, and I mean, I do agree. It's such a complex, like it's just supply chain, yeah, but it basically involves everybody on a construction project, and that's so hard to deal with. Your current main market is the US, right? And your idea is to expand. Your idea is to just stay in the US, or what are the plans?
No, our current customers are in the US, UK, and Canada today. So that's going to be like our priority at least for the next couple of years. I mean, there is a lot of requests and like pull, obviously, in the GCC market. There's so much like the scale of projects and like the size of the complexity is huge. But like I think for today, we've said like, okay, look, maybe just not quite yet, because that's a different type of supply chain problem there, right? Like, so we haven't sort of gotten into that, but like we hope to in the near future.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I know you're a busy guy, so I don't want to take much of your time, but before we leave, I would love to hear, given the fact that all you know and you're dealing with the industry, what do you think is going to change in the industry, like regarding to supply chain in the coming years? And what do you think professional needs to do, like a general contractor, a designer, or an owner, what they need to do to stay ahead of the game and not be leave out of what's happening? Besides using Crane, right?
I was about to say that. I mean, like the data democracy and sort of requesting real data, right? Like and being aware of like the supply chain conditions, whether you're an architect or a tradesperson or even a vendor, right? Understanding the demand side for them is much more important, right? I think that's about to change. Like you're no longer going into projects with very very clear understanding of like where the supply chain is today, what are my alternative vendors, who can I work with, how can I trust. So that's sort of something that's sort of improving in our industry. You're not going to sort of make decisions based on what someone said. You're going to make decisions on what the data tells you, right? So that's sort of the biggest shift that I'm seeing on the supply chain side. And also, like, look, whether you're in supply chain or, like, I don't know, something else, there's a huge adoption of AI today, and I think that's real. And every single company is using it, and that's changing the game for construction. And I think we're going to see a lot of good stuff coming up in the next, like, 6 months to a year.
Yeah, it is for sure. And before we say goodbye to each other, can you tell everybody where they can know more about you or Krane?
I mean, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can find me, Eshan, Jayamanne on LinkedIn. But, like, our website's www.krane.tech, so you can find us there. We're on a bunch of conferences. Like, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be at Autodesk, Procore, LCI, so you can find us there as well. So we're pretty active in the industry.
Absolutely. All right, Eshan, thanks so much for the time. It's great the work you're doing with Krane, and would love to see what else is expecting you in the future with all the stuff you're doing. All right.
Thank you, Valentin. I mean, you're doing some good work, sort of spreading the knowledge and sort of making sure there's education and awareness. That's such an important thing. So appreciate what you're doing as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll stay in touch. All right.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to our listeners. If you like this content, you can find past and upcoming episodes in ascworks.everse.com and at all of our Everse social media. We'd love to hear from you and recommendations for new content, so leave us a DM and we'll make sure to catch it.